Today we're going to show how to shoot a panorama. We're fortunate that we can take these pictures from the roof of our office building in London, and we've come up here and the first thing we're going to do is to find a nice place to put the tripod. Now, you don't have to use a tripod, but a tripod makes life so much easier because the camera's in a fixed position. When you're hand holding the camera, it's very, very difficult, and near I say impossible, to actually rotate the camera without moving the camera in some way, and that's going to make it more difficult to stitch the pictures together afterwards. So, as while it's not essential, a tripod is highly recommended. Okay, first thing to do is to get the camera as level as we possibly can. Now, for panoramas, a pan and tilt head is more useful than a ball and socket head because it's easier to lock each individual plane of movement and just move one or the other. So we're going to get the camera as level as we can. You can see there's a spirit level on this tripod, which makes it easier to get the camera nice and level, and we can check that in the viewfinder as well just to make sure everything's nice and square. So the next thing is to decide the beginning point and the end point of your panorama, where you're going to start and where you're going to finish. In this case, I'm going to start over there and I'm going to finish over here. So I'm going to set my camera up to the first picture, I'm going to frame that, and then I'm going to move the camera around just to check that everything looks okay, everything's level. Okay, I'm happy with that. You'll want to shoot in the manual exposure mode. This is to make sure that the exposures are consistent across the whole range. If you leave the camera in auto, then the exposure will maybe adjusted from shot to shot, as for example you go from slightly lighter buildings to slightly darker buildings, and that means the sky exposure will change. Then when you come to stitch them together, you're going to see the join where one picture's lighter, one picture's slightly darker, and you're going to have to mess around with the exposure levels and brightness levels to try and match them. Much easier to do that in camera. Set the camera to manual exposure, work out an average reading across the whole scene, and then every shot will be exactly the same as long as the light levels don't change. Also, for consistency, it's best to set the focus to manual focus and to focus on a midpoint and make sure you've got enough depth of field to make sure the whole scene is in focus. Okay, I've just taken an exposure reading and I'm getting 200th of a second at f11, which seems pretty good to me. And I'm going to take a couple of test shots just to make sure that that exposure looks really reasonable across the scene. And I can check on the LCD screen that this exposure is pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with that exposure. And there you can see that's not a bad exposure, and across the other side of the shot that's okay as well. Now, one of the secrets to a good panorama is the way that you overlap the individual pictures. So you can see my first image, I've got it set up. Now, as you can see, I've got the Unilever building on the far side of Blackfriars Bridge, right into the right hand side of the frame. Now, when I turn the camera, I'm going to rotate the camera. Again, with the camera on a tripod, the camera is rotating right on the lens axis. So I'm going to rotate the camera and this time I'm going to keep the Unilever building on the left side of the next frame. So the Unilever building is in both shots. It's on the right hand side of the first one, the left hand side of the second one. So when I come to join them, I can overlap those two pictures. I can line them up nice and precisely. What you don't want is to have to butt two pictures up edge by edge. You want to have an overlap. So I'm going to shoot the next picture now. So my next picture, the right hand side of the next picture, is that building on the other side of the Thames there with the green roof. So I'm going to move the camera, rotate the camera, so that that building is still in the next shot, but on the left hand side. Okay, that's my third shot. And now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to line up with that building over there that I can see, which is the next one on the far side. Okay, picture number 4, and one more, to good luck. I can see the gherkin over there on the left hand side of the frame, the next shot. Okay, and there are my 5 shots. Now this is fine, I've got the shots I need, I can stitch these together quite nicely. What I'm going to have though is a very, very long and narrow picture of 5 frames, which is going to be, well, long and narrow basically. There is another way of shooting panoramas which actually gives you a slightly deeper picture, which is in some ways better, and that is to turn the camera vertically like this, so that the long aspect of the image is creating the height of the frame. It does mean you've got to take more pictures to get the same panorama, but the panorama will not be quite so narrow, it'll be a bit deeper. So we'll do the same thing again this way around. I'm going to frame up the image. Now you may have spotted the immediate drawback of doing this. Now I'm rotating the camera on this axis here, the lens is over here. I'm not rotating the camera on the lens axis, which means that they're not going to align perfectly when I rotate the camera. You can get around this. The software, modern stitching software, can overcome this. It just makes it a little bit more fiddly, and it depends on the subject. But if you're really into your panoramas and really serious about it, you can buy an attachment which fits on your tripod and allows you to position the camera directly above the axis of rotation on the tripod, so that you still maintain that perfect rotation above the lens axis even when the camera's in a vertical position. Now when you're framing up your subject, it is better, you'll get a better result if you avoid the very widest angle settings of your lens. Here I've got an 18 to 55mm lens. And if I use the 18mm lens, this is quite a wide angle. Now there's always some perspective distortion at the very edges of the frame, which you don't really notice, but when you come to stitch pictures together, that can make them not really align perfectly. If you zoom in the lens to somewhere in the mid position, you're going to get a little less distortion on the edges, and you'll find it easier to stitch the pictures together afterwards. So there you have it. That concludes our tutorial on how to shoot a panorama. Look out for our tutorial on how to stitch it together using editing software.